If this video has found you, it is not because you were searching randomly, scrolling aimlessly, or passing time. It has appeared at a moment when something within you is ready to listen, not ready to be entertained, not ready to be distracted, but ready to recognize a deeper signal. Life does not speak loudly at first. It whispers through patterns, through timing, through moments that feel quietly significant. And when you are prepared, those whispers become impossible to ignore. Preparation does not mean perfection. It does not mean you have all the answers or that your life is orderly and resolved. Preparation means you have endured enough confusion to value clarity. It means you have suffered enough repetition to begin asking different questions. Growth begins not when the world changes, but when your inner posture toward life shifts. Something in you has softened, cracked open, or grown tired of running from itself. Many people believe readiness arrives when fear disappears. In truth, readiness often arrives while fear is still present, but no longer in control. You may still doubt yourself, still feel uncertain, still carry unresolved pain. Yet beneath that surface, a deeper part of you has matured. A part that can observe rather than react. A part that can wait rather than force. A part that understands that timing is not arbitrary but purposeful. There are seasons when answers remain hidden, not as punishment but as protection. Receiving insight too early can distort it. Power gained without maturity becomes destructive. Understanding without humility becomes arrogance. So life withholds, delays, and repeats lessons until the inner structure is strong enough to hold what is coming. When the moment is right, the message arrives naturally, without effort, without struggle. You may notice that lately you see familiar ideas differently. Words that once meant little now feel heavy with meaning. Silence feels less empty and more instructive. Solitude no longer feels like abandonment but initiation. These are signs of preparation. You are learning not just with your intellect but with your whole being. The mind is no longer racing ahead of the soul, it is beginning to listen. True transformation is not dramatic. It does not announce itself with noise. It unfolds quietly, like roots growing underground. Others may not notice it yet, but you feel it. A subtle shift in perception, a growing intolerance for what is false, a deeper hunger for what is real. When this hunger awakens, guidance appears, often disguised as coincidence. This is how meaning enters life. Not through force, but through alignment. Not through demand, but through readiness. When you are prepared, you do not need to chase truth. Truth finds you. It arrives through the right words, the right encounter, the right moment of recognition. And when it does, you know. Not because someone told you, but because something inside you resonates. If this message has reached you now, trust that it aligns with where you are becoming, not just where you have been. You are not late. You are not behind. You are unfolding according to a rhythm wiser than impatience. Continue to observe, continue to endure, continue to grow inwardly. What is meant for you will arrive when you can receive it fully, and when you do, it will change you in ways that last. Meaningful messages do not enter our lives randomly, even though they often appear disguised as coincidence. They arrive when something within us has shifted enough to recognize them. Inner readiness is not a conscious decision but a gradual internal maturation. It develops through lived experience, through disappointment, repetition, and moments of quiet reflection that slowly refine perception. Until this readiness exists, messages may pass by unnoticed, misunderstood, or dismissed as ordinary. The world is constantly communicating, but the ability to truly receive depends on the state of the inner listener when a pause. On is not ready, information remains superficial. Advice feels intrusive, guidance feels irrelevant, and insight feels abstract. This is not because the message lacks value, but because the inner framework required to integrate it has not yet formed. Readiness is the alignment between experience and understanding. It emerges when past struggles have softened the ego's need for control and certainty. At that point, the mind becomes receptive rather than defensive, and life signals begin to feel personal rather than external. Inner readiness often grows out of exhaustion, After repeatedly forcing outcomes, seeking validation, or resisting reality, a person reaches a point where old strategies no longer work. This fatigue is not failure, it is preparation. It loosens rigid expectations and creates space for deeper awareness. In that space, meaning can finally settle. Messages that once felt vague suddenly resonate, not because they have changed, but because the individual has changed. What is often labeled as accident or chance is better understood as synchronization. When inner conditions align with external events, meaning emerges naturally. A sentence overheard at the right moment, a book opened to the exact page needed, or a realization arising in silence can feel uncannily precise. These moments are not manufactured by willpower. They occur when attention sharpens and perception deepens. The mind stops rushing ahead and begins to notice what has always been present. Inner readiness also involves humility. It requires accepting that understanding cannot be forced or demanded. Some insights arrive only after one has been humbled by uncertainty. This humility opens a psychological threshold where learning becomes possible again. Instead of trying to dominate life, the individual begins to cooperate with it. Meaningful messages then feel less like instructions and more like confirmations of an inner truth already forming. Timing plays a crucial role in this process. The same message delivered too early can confuse or even harm, while delivered at the right moment it liberates. Life seems to respect this timing with remarkable precision. It withholds clarity until confusion has done its necessary work. This delay is not neglect, but intelligence. It ensures that when understanding arrives, it can be held responsibly and integrated fully. Inner readiness transforms how meaning is perceived. Instead of searching desperately for signs, the individual becomes quietly attentive. Awareness replaces anxiety. Patience replaces urgency. In this state, life no longer needs to shout. Subtle cues become sufficient. Meaningful messages find their way not through force, but through resonance. They arrive when the inner soil has been prepared, when experience has deepened awareness, and when the individual is finally capable of hearing what was always being said. Preparation is often misunderstood as the state of being flawless, confident, and fully resolved. In reality, true preparation has very little to do with perfection. It is rooted in emotional and psychological maturity, a quiet inner stability that allows a person to face life honestly rather than defensively. Perfection seeks control and certainty, while maturity accepts complexity, contradiction, and uncertainty without collapsing under their weight. A person can be deeply prepared while still feeling fear, doubt, and vulnerability. Emotional maturity develops through lived experience, not ideal conditions. It grows when expectations are broken, when relationships disappoint, and when personal limitations become undeniable. These moments challenge the ego's illusion of control and force an encounter with reality as it is. Instead of reacting impulsively or assigning blame, maturity slowly teaches restraint, reflection, and self-observation. Preparation emerges when emotions are no longer denied or projected outward, but acknowledged and understood internally, psychological M. Maturity involves the ability to hold tension without immediate resolution. An immature mind rushes to escape discomfort, searching for quick answers or external validation. A mature mind can remain present with ambiguity, allowing insight to unfold naturally. This capacity is essential for preparation because life's deeper truths rarely arrive fully formed. They reveal themselves gradually, requiring patience, openness, and the willingness to revise old assumptions. Perfection is rigid and fragile. It demands constant maintenance and collapses when reality deviates from expectations. Maturity, by contrast, is flexible and resilient. It allows mistakes to become teachers rather than threats to identity. A prepared person does not interpret failure as evidence of worthlessness, but as information. This shift in perception changes how challenges are approached. Instead of resisting difficulty, one begins to extract meaning from it. Emotional maturity also alters the relationship with fear. Fear does not disappear, but it loses its authority. Rather than dictating decisions, it becomes a signal to be examined. This internal dialogue creates space between impulse and action. Within that space, choice becomes possible. Preparation lives in this space, where reactions are no longer automatic and awareness guides behavior. Psychological maturity includes the ability to recognize patterns within oneself. Repeating emotional cycles, familiar conflicts, and habitual defenses are seen clearly rather than unconsciously reenacted. This recognition marks a turning point. When patterns are observed, they can no longer operate blindly. Preparation deepens as self-awareness replaces self-deception. The individual becomes less reactive to external circumstances and more attentive to internal processes. A mature inner state does not seek validation through appearance or achievement alone. It values coherence between inner values and outward actions. This alignment brings a sense of groundedness that perfection can never provide. When actions arise from inner clarity rather than insecurity, life begins to respond differently. Opportunities are met with discernment rather than desperation. Challenges are faced with curiosity rather than avoidance. Preparation, then, is not a finish line but an inner orientation. It is the readiness to engage with life honestly, to listen without defensiveness, and to act without illusion. Emotional and psychological maturity allow a person to receive what life offers without distortion. In this state, growth becomes sustainable, understanding becomes integrated, and the individual is capable of holding responsibility without being overwhelmed by it. Fear is often mistaken as a sign that a person is not ready. Many believe that readiness requires confidence without hesitation and clarity without anxiety. Yet fear is a natural response to uncertainty, change, and responsibility. Its presence does not indicate immaturity or weakness. What matters is not whether fear exists, but whether it governs choices. Readiness begins when fear is acknowledged without being obeyed. Fear arises from the instinct to protect what is familiar. It warns of risk, loss, and the unknown. When unmanaged, it narrows perception and pushes the mind toward avoidance or control. Decisions made under fear tend to preserve comfort rather than foster growth. Psychological readiness, however, introduces a subtle shift. Fear may still appear, but it is no longer the central authority. Awareness steps in, creating distance between emotion and action. This distance allows fear to be observed rather than suppressed. Suppression gives fear more power, forcing it to act indirectly through hesitation, self-sabotage, or rationalization. Observation dissolves its grip. When fear is met with curiosity instead of resistance, its message becomes clearer. Often fear signals expansion rather than danger. It appears when identity is challenged and new possibilities emerge. Readiness develops through repeated encounters with fear that do not end in collapse. Each time a person faces discomfort and survives, the nervous system learns resilience. Confidence grows not from the absence of fear, but from the knowledge that fear can be carried. This understanding transforms fear from an obstacle into a companion. It walks alongside action rather than standing in its way. Emotionally mature individuals recognize that fear is temporary, while the consequences of avoidance can be lasting. They understand that waiting for fear to disappear often means waiting indefinitely. Instead of demanding certainty, they move with partial clarity. This movement builds trust in one's capacity to adapt. Readiness expresses itself through this trust, not through emotional numbness. Psychological control by fear often manifests as overthinking, procrastination, or the constant search for reassurance. When fear dominates, decisions are outsourced to opinions, trends, or external authority. Readiness reclaims agency. It accepts responsibility for choice, knowing that mistakes are part of growth. This acceptance weakens fear's influence, because fear thrives on imagined catastrophe rather than lived experience. Allowing fear to exist without control also deepens authenticity. Pretending to be fearless creates inner division. Acknowledging fear creates coherence. This honesty grounds action in reality rather than performance. From this grounded state, decisions carry integrity. They reflect inner values instead of reactive impulses. Readiness is marked by the ability to choose meaning over comfort. Fear may protest, but it no longer dictates direction. Action becomes aligned with purpose rather than protection. In this state, growth feels challenging but not chaotic. The individual remains present, responsive, and deliberate. When fear loses control, life opens. Opportunities are approached with caution but not avoidance. Challenges are faced with respect rather than paralysis. Readiness does not erase vulnerability, it stabilizes it. Fear remains a voice in the room, but not the one holding the microphone. Delays in life are often experienced as obstacles, signs of failure, or evidence that something has gone wrong. The human mind is inclined to equate progress with speed, assuming that what is meant to arrive should do so quickly and without resistance. Yet many delays serve a protective function, guarding growth until the inner structure is capable of sustaining what is being formed. What feels like postponement on the surface is often preparation happening beneath awareness. Inner structure refers to the psychological, emotional, and moral capacity to hold responsibility, meaning, and change without distortion. When this structure is undeveloped, sudden success, insight, or power can overwhelm rather than enrich. The mind may misuse what it receives, the ego may inflate, or unresolved wounds may turn opportunity into self-destruction. Delays prevent this imbalance by slowing the process until stability is built internally. Growth requires integration, not accumulation. Experiences need time to be digested. Lessons need space to settle, and awareness needs repetition to become embodied. Without delay, understanding remains intellectual rather than lived. The pause allows reflection to catch up with experience. It forces patience, humility, and endurance, qualities that cannot be rushed into existence. Through waiting, the individual learns how to remain grounded even without immediate reward. Many delays arise when unconscious patterns are still active. Repeated obstacles often point to inner conflicts that have not yet been resolved. If progress were granted too soon, these conflicts would sabotage it. Life seems to insist that certain internal alignments occur before external movement can continue. This insistence appears as frustration but functions as guidance. It redirects attention inward, where the real work is needed. Delays also dismantle illusions. They expose unrealistic expectations, dependency on outcomes, and the belief that fulfillment comes solely from external achievement. When progress slows, identity built on speed and validation begins to loosen. This destabilization is uncomfortable, but it creates space for a more authentic sense of self to emerge. The individual becomes less defined by what is achieved and more by how experience is met. Patience cultivated through delay strengthens psychological endurance. Learning to tolerate uncertainty without collapsing builds resilience. This endurance becomes part of the inner structure that later allows one to face greater challenges without panic or avoidance. What is postponed is not denied, it is being preserved until it can be held with maturity. Delays also refine intention. When something is delayed, desire is tested. Superficial wants fade, while deeper commitments remain. This clarification ensures that when progress resumes, it aligns with genuine values rather than impulse. The individual moves forward with clearer purpose and greater responsibility. What eventually arrives after delay often feels different than imagined. It carries weight, depth, and meaning that could not have been appreciated earlier. The waiting reshapes perception, so the outcome is received with gratitude rather than entitlement. Delays protect not only the result, but the person receiving it. In this way, life's timing reveals an underlying intelligence. What seems withheld is being safeguarded. Growth is not rushed because it is being built to last. When the inner structure is strong enough, movement resumes naturally, and what once felt like delay is recognized as essential preparation. True transformation rarely announces itself. It does not arrive with dramatic moments, loud declarations, or visible milestones. Instead, it unfolds quietly through awareness and observation, in the subtle shifts of perception that gradually reshape how life is experienced. Because these changes are inward, they often go unnoticed by others, and even by the individual undergoing them. Yet, over time, they alter behavior, choices, and identity more deeply than any sudden breakthrough ever could. Awareness begins when attention turns inward without judgment. Rather than trying to fix or control inner states, the individual starts to notice thoughts, emotions, and reactions as they arise. This simple act of observation creates distance between the observer and the experience. What once felt overwhelming becomes something that can be seen, named, and understood. In this space, automatic reactions lose their urgency, and a quieter form of clarity begins to emerge. Observation reveals patterns that were previously invisible. Repeated emotional responses, habitual defenses, and familiar narratives about the self come into focus. These patterns do not dissolve through force or resistance. They loosen their grip when they are seen consistently and honestly. Awareness weakens unconscious behavior by bringing it into consciousness. What is seen clearly can no longer operate blindly. This process is subtle because it does not rely on dramatic effort. There is no need to declare change or prove growth. Transformation happens as the nervous system gradually learns new ways of responding. Over time, pauses appear where there were once impulsive reactions. Choices feel less reactive and more deliberate. The shift is quiet but profound, altering the direction of life without spectacle. Awareness also softens inner conflict. Instead of identifying completely with thoughts and emotions, the individual learns to witness them. This witnessing reduces self-criticism and defensiveness. Inner experiences are no longer enemies to be conquered, but messages to be understood. As resistance fades, integration becomes possible. Parts of the self that were once rejected or ignored find a place within conscio. Thus awareness, observation cultivates patience. Watching the inner world unfold teaches that change follows its own rhythm. Forcing transformation often strengthens the very patterns one seeks to escape. Quiet awareness allows growth to happen organically. The mind becomes less obsessed with outcomes and more attuned to process. In this state, transformation is sustainable because it is not driven by pressure. Because this kind of change is gradual, it often escapes immediate recognition. One day, however, the individual notices that situations which once triggered intense reactions now pass with ease. Old fears no longer dominate decisions. Relationships shift as boundaries become clearer and communication more honest. These changes feel natural rather than forced, as though life has simply reorganized itself. True transformation through awareness and observation respects the complexity of the human psyche. It understands that lasting change cannot be imposed from the outside. It must arise from within through consistent attention and honest presence. This quiet unfolding reshapes the inner landscape, and from that new landscape a different life emerges, one guided not by impulse or illusion, but by clarity, coherence, and inner stability. The pursuit of truth often begins with effort, striving, and searching. People read, analyze, question, and compare, believing that understanding must be hunted down through constant movement of the mind. Yet this restless seeking usually arises from inner fragmentation. When thoughts, values, emotions, and actions are misaligned, truth feels distant and elusive. The search itself becomes exhausting because it is driven by inner conflict rather than clarity. Alignment changes this dynamic entirely. Alignment occurs when the inner world comes into coherence. Thoughts are no longer in constant contradiction with feelings, and actions begin to reflect genuine values rather than fear or expectation. This internal harmony creates a receptive state. In such a state, truth does not need to be pursued aggressively. It is recognized when it appears because the mind is no longer distorted by urgency, insecurity, or projection. Chasing truth often involves imposing ideas onto reality. The mind clings to concepts, ideologies, or beliefs in an attempt to feel secure. This grasping narrows perception and filters experience through rigid frameworks. Alignment softens this grip. It allows openness without passivity and discernment without defensiveness. In this openness, Truth is encountered as lived experience rather than abstract theory. When alignment deepens, attention becomes refined. Instead of being scattered across endless possibilities, awareness rests fully in the present moment. This presence sharpens perception. Subtle insights that were previously overlooked become clear. Words heard at the right moment, events unfolding with precise timing, or inner realizations arising in silence feel meaningful because the inner environment is prepared to receive them. Truth arrives not as an intrusion but as recognition. Inner alignment also dissolves the fear of uncertainty. Much of the chase for truth is fueled by discomfort with not knowing. When alignment is present, uncertainty becomes tolerable. The individual trusts the process of unfolding rather than demanding immediate answers. This trust creates psychological space. Within that space, understanding emerges organically. Without strain, truth arriving naturally does not mean it is always comforting. It may challenge assumptions or require change. However, when alignment exists, resistance is reduced. The individual is less invested in defending identity and more open to growth. Truth is met with humility rather than argument. It integrates smoothly because it resonates with an already forming inner clarity. This natural arrival of truth often feels quiet and self-evident. There is no dramatic revelation, no need to convince others. The certainty comes from resonance rather than proof. The individual recognizes truth because it aligns with lived experience and inner integrity. It feels grounded, stable, and enduring. Alignment transforms life into a dialogue rather than a struggle. Instead of forcing answers, one listens. Instead of chasing meaning, one notices it. Truth reveals itself through timing, simplicity, and relevance. What once seemed hidden becomes obvious, not because reality changed, but because perception did. In this state, seeking gives way to understanding. Effort gives way to attentiveness. Truth no longer needs to be hunted because the inner conditions that obscured it have dissolved. It arrives naturally, settles deeply, and reshapes life from within, guiding action with quiet certainty and lasting coherence. So, if this message has reached you now, let it be a reminder rather than a command. You are not meant to force understanding or rush your becoming. What is unfolding within you is doing so with intention, even when it feels slow or unclear. Trust the quiet work taking place beneath the surface. Stay attentive, stay honest, and remain patient with your own process. When your inner world is aligned, what you seek will no longer feel distant. It will meet you naturally at the exact moment you are able to carry it, recognize it, and live it.